Okay, welcome everybody to the latest ANZTB SIGiST. Great to have you here on this lunchtime. We've got a really special guest today, Jason Spencer, and he's going to be here to tell you about the value of engaging testers early. Now, we all know that it's really important to be engaged in the software development lifecycle as early as possible from a testing perspective. And we've got Jason here today to talk us through not only why it's so important, but more importantly, how you can actually help influence that so that you can get the best outcomes for testing on your projects. So welcome, Jason. It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Stuart, for such a nice introduction. And thank you, everyone, for sharing your time with me today. I know how valuable that time can be. So hopefully we will get to learn a couple of things together.
Yep, and we're streaming live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on YouTube as well at the same time. This session will be recorded, so if any of your colleagues want to check this out at their own convenience, you can just go to any of those platforms, click on the link, and see the whole recording. So I just wanted to, make the acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So we're just going to have quick introductions. A little bit about the ANZ testing board. We'll go through the presentation for about 20 minutes and we'll wrap up with a Q&A. We'll keep this to under an hour. We know everyone's lunch times are pretty precious, so we want to make sure that you guys get a chance to grab some lunch, take some time out, and still get a little bit of a break in between your busy schedules. So with that, as you may or may not know, the Australia-New Zealand Testing Board is the official IS2QB member board for Australia-New Zealand. It is a not-for-profit organisation, and we've been going for 20 years now. We aim to support and improve and advance software testing as a profession within Australia and New Zealand. So what that actually means is, because we're the member board for Australia and New Zealand, we are involved in reviewing exam syllabuses or syllabi, and we help promote education of testers, and we really encourage people to get qualified. So these are qualifications you can have for life. They're very transferable, etc. And we encourage people to take exams so that we can spread the word and get the standards of testing up where it belongs. So we are part of the fabric of the testing industry. We present at Testing Talks conference in Melbourne and other conferences as well. And we represent Australia and New Zealand on the international stage in terms of the testing industry. Might be hard to see some of the actual names here, but this is the actual the full board with our chairman David Heyman and vice chairman Ronak Panchal, who might be in the audience today. So that's the board, and what we offer is really support on ISTQB, industry learnings like the SIGiST, training provider accreditations. We support the development of the ISTQB syllabi, and we support education and certification in the software industry. So this is a few more kind of slides on this. We're always looking at new certifications with the exam provider SIGiST. There's always new ones coming out. Massive one that's kind of really a hot topic right now in terms of AI. So there's an exam on that, which is excellent. We've got the A4Q Selenium for tester, and obviously, one of the big things is trying to increase the maturity of testing in organisations across Australia and New Zealand. And with that, there's obviously the test maturity model integration, the TMMI certification, which is gaining massive popularity right now as well. To book certification exams, you can follow the links on the ANZTB website to the SIGiST shop, and we've got a link there if you want to, and I think we've got a QR code at the end of this presentation as well. So there's certification pathway, which is pretty good. There's over 1.4 million exams taken so far, with over 1 million certificates awarded. And when you actually do get certified through SIGiST and the ANZTB, you get put on the list of certified testers, so that employers can go there, check it out, and see that, you know, who is actually qualified for certain things as well. So our accredited training providers are Planet, SoftEd, AJQ, and Addicton. And, you know, there is also, if you wanted to, your organization wanted to be part of the ISTQB partner program, then you can get involved. It just requires a certain number of testers in your organization to be qualified at certain levels. And you can see there's a few of the organizations that are gold, silver, platinum, and global partners as well. And these SIGiSTs are online. We are actually looking at doing some of these in person. Now that COVID is well and truly over, we might get those going site by site across Australia and New Zealand in the next year or so. So Jason has a bachelor's degree in biological sciences. He's got the advanced ISTQB certification. And he's got a lot of experience in the senior consultant level, you know, throughout his career. He's recently a quality assurance manager within a fintech scale-up, and he's got extensive experience in the health sector as a test lead. In terms of his professional endeavors, he covers off planning, design, methodologies for improvement, optimizing testing practices and methods, automation approaches, and obviously reviews and assurance of test documentation. And currently, Jason is the test manager for the Queensland Ambulance Services Transition Program at eHealth Queensland. Outside of work, Jason enjoys outdoor activities and travel, having recently, last year, returned from Borneo, seeing wild orangutans, no less, and an amazing array of other wildlife. Anything you'd like to add to your profile there, Jason?
No, not really, other than the outdoor activities are obviously the most important, and I highly recommend Borneo to whoever hasn't actually been there. It's actually quite a good experience.
Yep, I'll have to check it out. I'll add it to the list. Sounds great. So, you know, here's a little bit more about Jason. Do you want to touch on any of these, Jason, about what you're currently doing at eHealth Queensland?
Sure. Well, I think the one of the first things I'd just like to mention is with having a scientific background at first, one doesn't think that lends itself to testing in the ICT industry, but that attention to detail and rigorous scientific study actually lends itself quite well to testing. So if you know anybody in the science background, if you can convince them to become a tester, so much the more better for us. I would say that the current project that I'm working on right now does comprise multiple projects within a complete program, and that it evolves over probably 250 sites across all of Queensland, and encompasses everything from packaged applications on desktop applications or on desktops to Microsoft 365 and data migrations and user migrations and a variety of other things. So it's quite comprehensive, and looking forward to continued challenges over the next few months.
Yeah, it sounds interesting, and I spent a good bit of time at eHealth Queensland opening up a couple of hospitals over the years, so there's a lot going on there. Really exciting place to work.
It is.
So we'll get into the presentation, and I'll let you kind of drive the narrative there, and
Sure.
and I'll be working on the slides for you in the background. So I'll just remove myself for now, and over to you, Jason. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stuart. So the value of engaging testers early and how we can influence it. I think it's a great subject, something I really enjoy talking about most of the time whenever I get an opportunity, and today is one of those opportunities. I know one of the things is right off the bat, a lot of people might think that this seems like it's common sense. But what I've found throughout my tenure as a test consultant and a senior tester and a manager, that common sense that we might think everybody has with regards to testing may not actually hold true, and that a lot of the people that we work with that are outside of the testing space may actually have different understandings of what testing actually is and the value that we as testers can bring to the table, especially with engaging with the test team early. So without further ado, I'll just go through some of those bullet points. I'm going to go moderately rapidly through them because I want to spend more time on the what I find fascinating case studies that illustrates the point. So without further ado, risk mitigation is definitely one of the values of engaging testers early. When a tester is engaged early, we're able to actually identify high-risk areas early, which allows the team to prioritize testing efforts and reduces the likelihood of critical failures. One of the other items, improved requirement clarity. So what we find is that if testers are engaged early, they can assist the BA and the PM with regards to reviewing requirements. They can identify ambiguities, they can make sure things are testable, and it actually reduces misinterpretations along the way with regards to development as well. For example, a little while ago, I was presented with a list of requirements that a BA had taken a large amount of time on. It comprised probably over 200 different requirements, and when I had the opportunity to sit down with them and go through them all, we realized that of the 200, perhaps 5 of them were actually testable. So if I had been engaged earlier with that whole process, it would have saved that BA probably 3 or 4 days worth of work, and also would have increased their knowledge about what kind of requirements are something that testers look for as being testable. So the next thing is defect prevention. So obviously, if we engage testers early, they can prevent defects, and that's not just through testing, but they can actually catch potential issues before coding begins by participating in planning and design phases, which then saves time and cost compared to fixing defects later in the software development lifecycle. We also see better test planning. So if testers are brought in early and they're along for the journey, it allows testers to actually design more comprehensive test strategies and cases that are aligned to the project goals, ensuring broader coverage and fewer gaps. We see reduced rework, as mentioned with the defect prevention. If developers don't make something that it turns out isn't fit for purpose, and testers are able to get in there a little bit early and provide some feedback, it does actually reduce a lot of rework during testing cycles. Another one that's really important for me from a sociability aspect really is the enhanced collaboration that you get with engaging testers early. So if testers are brought in early, they become a part of the group. You're allowed to be working alongside developers. You might take part in particular meetings even as an observer. You can foster better stakeholder relationships with communication. You can align the team on quality goals from the start. So that's when we get into the discussions about shifting to the left, and how I personally believe that quality is everybody's responsibility. And I think testers are very pivotal in communicating that. Last but not least, we have faster delivery. So a lot of PMs like to see this, that they're not necessarily saving money by engaging testers later on. What they're actually doing is going to end up cost more money. So if they engage with testers early, testers have the ability to do all of those things previously mentioned. And it helps with maintaining a tight timeline and schedule. Next slide, please. Conversely, the potential outcomes of late engagement are pretty much the opposite of everything we just talked about. So one of the results is poor requirement quality. As I mentioned earlier, just the amount of time that a BA took without actually asking testers whether or not these items were actually something that we could look at as requirements and create test cases from. The next one is late discovery of defects. So what we end up seeing is that because testers don't have that opportunity to be along for the journey, if the testing cycles are at the end of the software development lifecycle, they find these defects. These defects turn out to be quite time-consuming defects, especially if the software is quite complex. And then also the other thing is that critical bugs might actually slip through to production due to late-stage testing, and that's something we'd really like to avoid. Reduced test coverage. What you find is that during a compressed testing schedule, which happens to the best of us, the focus actually shifts from doing comprehensive testing with negative test cases and a variety of other things to simply concentrating on happy path and making the assumption that an end user will definitely not go outside the boundaries, which we all know is not necessarily the case. And yeah, so we would like to get as much test coverage as possible. The other thing is that there is a lack of risk-based focus. If testers aren't engaged early and are part of meetings and understanding what the solution is that the project is actually looking to solve, it makes it difficult for a high-risk area sometimes to be identified. And so then what ends up happening is that we see mitigation strategies that are more reactive than proactive, and we'd like to avoid that. We get also poor collaboration and knowledge silos. As mentioned earlier, it's always best when you're a part of a team. Say, for instance, I'm from Canada, so if I was to use a hockey example, say you get a new team member that's drafted from an alternate team, and the rest of the hockey players on that team take a little while to warm up to that new person. And if they were kind of there from the get-go during the preseason training and a variety of other things, they would definitely be welcomed and much more trusted to be a part of the team. And so early involvement of testers is quite imperative for that. One of the things from a technical side would be missed automation and test data planning. So once again, I was on a project recently where a developer was going to be doing something, and nobody bothered to ask whether or not the test data was actually going to be available. It turns out that testers would have been required to create that test data to enable them to be able to do their work. And unfortunately, that was a missed opportunity. So that was not the best outcome. And the other thing is missed automation opportunities. Some automation packages might have a variety of hooks that a developer who becomes familiar with that automation may actually put into their code to help with test automation activities. And that's something that we would like to see more and more, especially for test cases that are regularly exercised. Then we get increased cost of quality. Obviously, if you are not involving testers early and you're waiting until the very last part of that, a lot of times testers do help to bring that quality aspect into the team early if they are brought in early. If you wait later, that may not be the thing that people are concentrating on, and so there is a cost of quality there. Last but not least, and one of the most imperative ones for me in every project that I work in, is we really don't want testers to be perceived as bottlenecks. So if there's late engagement, testers don't understand exactly what it is that they're testing, requirements are vague, a variety of other things. Testers then become looked upon as bottlenecks to moving things to production, when in fact that's not the case. So early engagement helps to avoid that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So I guess the thing that we want to find out from those of us who have joined the meeting today is, what have you actually found that impedes early engagement In your career, what exactly have you seen that stops testers from being engaged early in projects? Give you a couple of minutes, and feel free to type something into the comments section of our live stream today. And Stuart will, I'll just hand it over to you for a couple of minutes here.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions. In terms of engaging testers early, does it matter in terms of the methodology if it's a V model versus waterfall or agile approaches, in your view, in your experience?
No, I would say that in my experience working in all of those different software development lifecycle methodologies, that whether it's waterfall, V model, or agile, it stands the same. Early tester engagement, I think, is really, really imperative. For waterfall, for instance, testers can encourage PMs and developers in calling out that they would like to see formal walkthroughs before development actually begins, so that everybody is on the same page and they understand what's going on. They can participate in document reviews to clarify ambiguities and requirement deficiencies. When it comes to agile, you have the ability to participate in backlog grooming, user story creation, and then you've got the concept of 3 amigos, which could be quite valuable to your team. So yeah, I would say it's definitely got value across the board.
Yeah, and have you found any specific actions or approaches which improved early engagement that showed results?
Yeah, I think that a couple of the actions that have actually improved engagement from my standpoint is actually speaking to a PM and providing them the rationale, right? So as testers, a lot of times testers tend to be quiet and they put themselves on mute. I always tell people that silence does not mean yes or approval of what's being discussed. I think that it's up to us as testers to communicate to the PM that not only this hasn't done or that's a problem or something, but actually relate to them what is the risk of that. We're not able to test this, we're going to cut this because we don't have time, sounds like a complaint. Whereas if you flip it around and you say, if we were provided a bit more time, we would be sure that we have covered this aspect. Say for instance, in a financial transaction, that people are getting the correct change. And the PM will automatically think to themselves, okay, I see the value to that then. So that's really good. The other thing I also would encourage people to do is, if you are brought on early, is to engage with the rest of the team. Find out, how do developers like to be communicated with? Some developers like to have face-to-face meetings. Some prefer Slack or Microsoft Teams as a chat. Some of them just want you to put all of your test steps and issues into the ticket, and they'll look at it when they can get to it. If you present it as a collaborative approach, what you'll find is that these people that you work with begin to engage with you in a much more substantive way. And as testers, I think that's really up to us to put our best foot forward in that regard.
Yeah, and I think I 100% agree. I also think that one of the most important things or skills as a tester are your soft skills. So, building relationships with the PM, building relationships with the BAs, right? Mm-hmm. And the development team. So it's not siloed, and you're not just this kind of bot that sits there crunching out test cases and results. Like actually building strong relationships with those other disciplines within a project team, no matter what the methodology, is really critical to gain the trust. And I also think that if there are a lot of testers out there that can get bogged down in technical language, etc., right? Mm-hmm. A lot of developers too. If you can actually put it into business terms, what the risk is, and like you said, if there's a particular critical requirement that a financial transaction is 100% accurate, etc., to the right decimal points or whatever it is, if you're working on a trading system or whatever, then if you can actually put that risk into real business terms of what the user may end up experiencing if this was to go wrong in production, then I think that it can really sell it.
Yep.
You're really putting the impact in there of the importance of this particular item, right? And I think that's what would really hit home. And then when hopefully if they agree with you, then you're building up that trust. So when you're actually raising something the next time, they're on board with it. We've got a comment from Veronica on LinkedIn, and Veronica says a lack of BAs completing their discovery is an impediment to early engagement. Any thoughts on that?
Sorry.
Any thoughts on that, Jason?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that as testers, though, if we are able to early engage with those BAs, we can assist with them completing their discovery, because what we can say as testers, that if you are doing discovery from, say, like a stakeholder finding out use case scenarios, this is what we're hoping to achieve. How does the user actually use the product? And don't make assumptions that they're going to use it a particular way. We know that functionality and options exist, but how do they actually use those? And so to that end, I do agree that BAs can take a long time with regards to that. But I also think that if your team involves testers early, even as I say, as an observer, not as an actual participant, and some of those, say, discovery meetings, that can be quite useful.
Yeah, 100%. All right. I've got a few more questions, but I might save those for a little bit later. If we want to go on to the next slide.
Next slide, please.
Yep.
All right. So what I have found, what commonly impedes early tester engagement, is really these top 5 items. And I think a majority of the people watching today or listening today would definitely agree. One of them is the lack of awareness or understanding of QA's and testing's role, depending on how your company or firm looks at you as quality analysts or testers. The result is the same. We are there to help with quality. We're not just necessarily testing things where they give you, say, a new build of an application. We're doing way more things. So the real common misconception is that testing is just about finding bugs before releasing to end users. So that's why testing always gets stuck at the end. There's no need for that. Developers are like, they're very good at their jobs, but they are making assumptions. And it's a bit like a campfire story. By the time you get to testers, it's very different from the very beginning of it. And we would like to kind of be a couple of people after the origin, a couple of people in, and then at the end as well. So it routinely actually leads to testers being brought in way too late to assist the project team. Then you kind of get blamed for it, and we'd like to avoid the blame game. So by being a bit more vocal in meetings, or even talking to your test manager, saying, hey, there's this project that's firing up. I see that it relates somehow to my other project. Maybe we should get testers on that early. I think that'd be something really good. The next thing is leadership and stakeholder misalignment. So what you can find is that testing and quality assurance tends to get sidelined by key decisions that affect testability and quality, because the product owners, project managers, technical leads may not actually prioritize early tester engagement. So back to Stuart's comment with regards to not necessarily talking technical, but explaining in real terms what the impact is and how we can provide value, always goes an extra mile in that regard. I think the belief that requirements should be completed first is also a really big misnomer. People have this thing that testing isn't required until requirements are actually solidified. Whereas, as I mentioned earlier, if testers were brought on earlier, what you would see is that those requirements are much more focused. They're much more able to be tested. So the expectation on testers is much more reasonable. If, for instance, I get a requirement, let's say it's a performance requirement, and says, the internet must bring you to this website, within a marginal amount of time. My answer to that is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the first byte that comes back after you've typed in the URL? Are we talking about the full display of a page? What are we actually discussing? And a lot of people don't realize that there is minutia, and we need to get the vagueness and ambiguity out of those things. So the next thing is project silos.
I guess just on that point, just on that point, Jason, like, I think you're right in that a lot of organizations just assume, okay, we'll just get the testers in just before they need to start executing tests, not recognizing the need. There's actually a lead time in terms of test case preparation, ensuring you've got requirements traceability, so you're ensuring your solution, if all the tests pass, is fit for purpose, it meets the requirements. But I guess the challenge there is, like, how do we kind of shift left when we're actually only being brought on board at the very last minute, once the design is nailed down, the requirements are done, but they may not be, 40% of it may not be actual testable requirements or need some refinement, etc. I guess, like, in my mind, it is actually quite difficult unless you've got some support in the project team or in the organization where they've actually had a good experience of bringing testers on earlier in the life cycle and therefore know the value of it. So is there anything that, I'm sure we'll get onto it, that people can actually do, like, to try and promote the value of getting testers on board, and who would be the people they would need to kind of try and promote to?
I guess the thing is to, and we'll get into that in one of the later slides as well, is first of all, if you are brought into a project late, and we all know that there's going to be an issue, one of the things to do is to percolate that up to, say, your test manager or to the PM and say, the testing is only allocated for 4 weeks, and it's 12 weeks, and instead of being what people would say, like a roadblock to progress, you would just present to them more of a, this is what I am able to do. So what we will do is we will do the subset of test cases. If you're satisfied with that, then we can sign off on that and call it a day. If you're not, then let's have a discussion about extending out, because you think that quality is more important to the release of your product, depending on the industry that you work in. You work in the healthcare industry, you don't necessarily want people to die because you've released something that's faulty. In the financial industry, you don't want to release something where somebody loses a few $1 million because you shaved off a week of testing time. So it's really, we can only do as much as we can do as testers, right? As long as it's acknowledged that we brought that up and they've decided to deal with it in some way and you've got a record of it, then we just kind of have to move on from that, I think. And what you will see is that project managers and project directors begin to talk to each other, and they'll say, you know what, I had a really good experience working with this person, and that we found that we actually solved a lot of issues before we went to market on this application, and I highly recommend maybe you try this methodology as well. And I think it's over time.
I think part of that education as well is actually using the structures on a project to actually put your point forward. So on every project, there's going to be a risk log, right? So you could actually have that conversation with the PM or the test manager or whoever and say, look, here's what we could do. This would actually take this much time, but it could be time well invested to, like on your earlier slide, to prevent defects down the track by having requirements that actually are testable, etc. Right? So if we could do this, if we don't do this, the impact, which you'd put on a risk log, the impact is that we're probably going to find more defects in system integration test or UAT potentially, or whatever, right? And then when that risk is potentially realized, then it's like, well, it's almost like an I told you so moment, but at least you're kind of upfront with it, saying, if we did this earlier, or if we could static test the business requirements before they're baselined, etc., we could actually probably detect a lot of defects on paper before they actually get built.
Exactly.
I think if you use the risk log, use those project structures, some of the reporting, right? There's a risk that we might slip because of this, because the requirements haven't been fully reviewed by the test team, or they haven't had access to it, or whatever. I think just using some of those project mechanisms.
Oh, absolutely. I think it takes the ambiguity out of it as well, right? Because every risk register also has a mitigation column. And that mitigation is something that is agreed upon by that team. And they've acknowledged that there is a risk, and this is what they're choosing to do with it. If testing extension is not part of that, and they choose to do future releases as defects are found, well, that's something that was discussed, it was decided upon, and it doesn't fall back on testing. So if you stay silent and you just kind of think to yourself, how am I going to get this all done? And you don't say anything and you don't raise a risk, it's going to come back to testing. And we would really like to avoid that as testers, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
So let's move to the next slide. Let's just do that.
Back on.
All right.
These are the good bits. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. The exciting things. So let's go with the case study. Number one, Heathrow Terminal 5 launch. I'm sure some people have heard of this. Some people may not have. It was essentially a multi-billion-dollar 10-year project by British Airways and the British Airway Authority to create a brand new terminal. As part of that, there was also a large amount of IT infrastructure that was built out and apparently subsequently tested. There was over 180 IT suppliers and 160 IT systems going through this terminal, which meant obviously you would want to do a lot of testing. However, in 2007, the CIO or CTO, I can't remember who, announced that 2007 was going to be the year of testing. So essentially acknowledging they hadn't extensively tested prior to that, that this was going to be the year they're going to do it all. Some of the situations that they found themselves by not engaging testing earlier, whether it's a company or personal individuals, is really they found themselves needing to hire a huge number of people, a lot of them test consultant contractors, in a very limited amount of time. They tried to bring them up to speed, provided very little knowledge for them to be able to complete their roles in such a complex automated system. And then, to top it all off at the end, they knew that there were still issues, but they still went ahead without doing enough real life simulations, if you will. So let's call that pre-production or production validation testing. What ended up happening was that on opening day, the automated system indicated many times that bags had been loaded onto airplanes. So airplanes actually lifted off empty, except for the passengers, who then found themselves without their baggage. And the other thing they forgot to do was actually the specialist technicians who were flipping the switch essentially for production of terminal system on, forgot to ask anybody about testing filters that may have been used by developers prior to doing that. And they neglected to do that, which meant that a lot of baggage that was coming in from different airlines was marked as unrecognized, and it ended up going to a manual storage facility. So what happened? Over 500 different flights were delayed and over 42,000 bags were misplaced. And I don't know if anyone's seen 42,000 bags, but that's probably the equivalent of a football field. And it's quite a sight to behold. It took a long time for them to fix it. One of the biggest things I think from the end result of what we can learn from this, though, is that if they engaged testers earlier, a lot of those systems would have had a lot more reliability. And then if they had kept those people with that body of knowledge of the problem that was looking to be solved, they would have been able to create much more real life simulations. They also would have been there when those specialist technicians were going through a checklist of some kind to make sure everything was ready to be able to provide feedback. And that would have probably saved them the huge public relations crisis that they had, millions of dollars of lost revenue and claims against them. The system fixes took months to stabilize, and at the end, their reputation is probably still affected and damaged by the public. A lot of people still don't want to go to that terminal. So that's one of the things that we can learn from that. And then next slide, please. All right, case study number 2. So moving from transportation to finance, one of the areas I'm familiar with more. Knight Capital Group, 2012. This is a really famous example. So they experienced over $460 million loss within 45 minutes of the opening of the New York Stock Exchange. What essentially happened is that they securities regulator in America decided that they were going to institute a new rule that allowed retail investors to get the best possible price for shares. As part of that, they only had about 60 days to code a whole bunch of new things that were able to compensate for this new change. In that huge rush, what ended up happening on the big scale is that Knight Capital Group, which was the largest share trader in America in 2012, essentially bankrupted themselves within 45 minutes. I think that the thing is that came out of it, although they have never really addressed it, what it appears to be is that because testers weren't really involved, not just from the beginning, but all the way through to make sure everything was okay, is that a feature flag had been left on that was originally used for testing in a 2008 code base that accidentally got left on when they migrated the code to a server. They ended up not doing an implementation plan that was verified by testers, and this is the end result. They ended up needing to get a $400 million line of credit from some private creditors who then took over the company and then subsequently sold it on to another company. So Knight Capital Group went from being number 1 to essentially not existing in a period of a couple of years, just because of a 45-minute period.
Wow, a feature flag.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and apparently the feature flag was them doing some testing on buying high and selling low. And when the stock market opened, that code got activated, and within 45 minutes, over 4 million trades had been exercised.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huge impact.
Yeah, they had a very hard time unraveling those, and it cost them their entire company, just a feature.
I think it's kind of symptomatic. Like in a lot of organizations who haven't been burnt by software failures can be a little bit kind of carefree and a bit lackadaisical about it, a little bit kind of cowboy about it. And what I find is those that have actually been burnt in the past actually have a really solid kind of value for testing, just generally as a profession. And it is it's interesting where you see kind of examples like this, and like Heathrow Airport, where you're not kind of respecting the risks you're taking by not doing things properly and basically cutting corners, right? And I think your point about, you know, the testing people that were involved in Heathrow, I think that's relevant as well in terms of having domain knowledge of a particular industry or system or ecosystem at a client. That is invaluable because it can, if you've got, you know, multiple releases and you've got a different test team for each release, they're having to get up a learning curve incredibly quickly, and they don't have the history, etc. So you can actually, in terms of burn rates, you could be wasting a hell of a lot of money by not keeping that IP within that client or that particular project. Exactly. And I think a lot of PMs, program managers, maybe kind of don't really have a full grasp on that in terms of, you know, maintaining that IP.
Exactly. And a lot of people just assume more is better. And I always tell people that the number of test cases is not indicative of quality. You could make test cases until the cows come home, but whether those test cases are actually focused on the high risk areas is a different matter. And I think that by creating a whole bunch of fluff like that, it actually makes it more difficult to make sure that you've actually covered what the actual scope is.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So
All right.
I guess.
Yeah, we'll do this quickly. Maybe we'll just go. I'm cognizant of time, so maybe instead of doing comments, we'll just go right to it if that's okay.
Yeah,
if everyone's
let's
okay
do
with
it.
that.
Yep.
So I think one of the biggest things that we can get out of today's discussion, other than the fear factor of case studies and promoting the value, is what can we do as testers, right? How do we create a culture of early tester engagement? I think one of the biggest things, and Stuart, you've touched on this as well, is that you got to be a quality champion. And if you're not going to be the quality champion, you really need to find somebody who can do that role. And by that, I mean that making sure that quality is everybody's responsibility, from the BA to the developer to everyone else, right? So you don't want code that comes from a developer to be completely untrustworthy, that you want to exhaustively test it to the point where you're holding up things. But if you've got that relationship with the developer, that they understand what you're going to be testing, and you explain to them, well, if you do these unit tests and stuff, like maybe you're doing like internal API testing, and they build a lot of that stuff in, okay, I'm going to concentrate on this other part, and I know that they've got that covered because they understand quality is part of what their job is. And so as testers, I think that it's really important for us to share that. The other thing is get leadership buy-in, whether that is your test manager and encouraging them to reach out to PMs or directors to say, hey, there's a project that's going on, it's going to integrate with our project, they don't have a test team on it, maybe they should consider doing that earlier than later, and explaining to them, in non-technical terms, what is the value and what is the potential outcome if not doing those things.
Yep.
Shifting.
We just got a comment from Veronica in the chat. How can you do it when you are at the mercy of external vendors? All
right. So if you're at the mercy of external vendors, so I don't fully understand the scope of the question, whether you as a tester are testing something that the external vendor is providing to you and you're making sure and you're trying to communicate to them. I would say one of the things that you might be able to do if that's the case is provide them what your test scripts are and say, listen, this is what I'm planning on testing. My hope is that the developer has cursory checked this as well so that it actually works. So when I get it, I can be assured that when I run these, for the most part, they're going to work. Obviously, as a tester, we have a bit more expertise and we will go into a bit more detail. But at an outset, that's probably one of the things to do. If your external vendor is, I don't know, say they're, let's say they're Microsoft. And they're probably working with your company or the team. What I would do is I would go to the PM and I would say, listen, the quality of what I'm getting from the Microsoft consultant isn't quite what I need to complete my job, and these are the reasons why. Is there a way that we can work around that? Can I book some time with them in order to explain the situation? It's all kind of a unique situation, but I try to think outside of the box and look at it more as an opportunity than an issue. Is probably one of the better ways to do it. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy trying to deal with people that just don't get testing.
Yep. Veronica's elaborating on that, saying, wanting to test early and the vendor doesn't provide requirements and scope till closer to the proposed testing schedule. So you're not getting they want to test early, but they're not getting the requirements and the scope.
Yeah. So what you could do, and I've had to do very, very recently, is if you're not getting what you think are requirements and stuff, sometimes what you need to do is think outside of the box. Does the product have any user guides or documentation? And then I would just tell my PM that, listen, they can't provide me any requirements. They can't provide me any documentation. I have no idea what they're actually even covering or what the scope is, but what I can do is I downloaded their user guide, and I can tell you that you can relate to them from a PM level, that we will test, and I will create test cases based on the vanilla version of this application.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing that you really can do, right? You're providing a solution while still letting them know that you're limited in what you're able to do.
Yeah. And I think, again, you'd just be raising this as a risk in the risk log, and you'd be
Yes.
raising it up the chain to your project manager, program director, or whatever, through that risk kind of process or through reporting, and saying, look, here are the risks that if we don't get these requirements, if we don't get the scope, then we could actually, it could actually impact go live date, planned go live date, right? Because everything's pushing to the right and the right's not moving. So we're compressing things here. Here are the risks associated with that. I think just use those project mechanisms that are always in place or should be to actually, to promote your case.
I think you're absolutely correct with like following the formal standards that your team's got with that risk register, making sure that it's formally documented, because if all these discussions are happening in Microsoft Teams or, water cooler chats.
I think you make a really good point there, Jason. If you actually were to get the kind of vanilla user guide or manual to then kind of generate your vanilla test cases, etc., it's actually showing you are actually being proactive. You're on the front foot. You're wanting this, right? And I think people will appreciate that, all right? As long as you're doing it in a professional manner, you're not kind of screaming and shouting about it, but you're using those project mechanisms. You're saying what I can do given what the minimum that I've actually got right now. You're showing kind of, progress.
And your project manager will greatly appreciate that too, because it gives them the ability to approach that external stakeholder and say, listen, this is what we plan on providing to you currently at this point due to the fact that you can't provide these things to us. If you have a problem with that, let us know. So then you can actually put it in back onto the stakeholder instead of taking all that on yourself. You've relieved yourself from the responsibility of trying to pull something that you're never going to get.
I think you have to flag it up, because then you're providing the project manager, the program director, with information for them to make informed decisions. So you're actually taking the weight off your shoulders, saying that I'm calling this out, we're doing as much as we can. So don't be surprised if things come late or we have to reduce scope because we still need to fit in with the timeframes, etc. So I know we're pushed for time, and I know I'm derailing this a little bit, but thank you for the questions, Veronica.
Yeah, thank you. That is a really good question. I guess a couple of the other items, I'll go a little bit quick. I know we're crunched for time. Building collaborative cross-functional teams. I think we've discussed that already. Bringing testers along for the journey, as they say in the business, that is always important. And I think one of the other things that's really important, though, is that empowering testers to speak up. So what you can be is somebody who leads by example with regards to meetings. Turn your camera on. Take yourself off of mute. Nobody respects somebody who puts themselves on mute and doesn't ever show their face in a meeting. We live in a digital world, working remotely or from home. If people enjoy remote working and working from home, I would say give your employer fewer things to think about with regards to that. And by doing that as well, people have a harder time forgetting that you're there. And you're creating an environment that allows testers to speak up. So if you've got less senior testers in your team, say you've got 4 or 5 testers and you're the senior tester, empower them or make them bold enough to ask a question. Shoot them the question that you would normally ask and say, hey, so-and-so, can you ask this question in the meeting? And get them used to that. A lot of people aren't.
I think it's about building profile of everyone in the test team, right? And get them to ask people for certain things. Because I think you're right. It's too easy to have your camera off, be on mute, and just be in the background. I think it's important to empower everyone to put their best foot forward.
Exactly. And, the more you do it, the easier it is, I think. Last but not least, make early engagement a process standard. If you can convince PMs who've had a good experience to be a quality champion by talking to other PMs and saying, this project that you've got going on, my suggestion is get testers in there earlier. That's going to really really help you. And the other thing is just if you can have any power over it, if there's like, project schedules and software development lifecycle checklists that your company uses as a standard, make sure that early tester engagement is one of those checklist items. That's it. Next slide, please.
Okay, well, it's the Q&A. So if anyone's got any other questions, just put them in the comments. We've got about 5 minutes left, so we can take any other additional questions. But whilst people are thinking about that, I might have a couple more for you.
Sure.
Do you have any personal examples of where a lack of early engagement caused quality concerns?
Yes, I do. Thank you for asking. I've actually got several. I won't go through the exhaustive list, but I would say, for instance, when I worked in the healthcare sector, one of the things that we experienced was that PM thought everything was swimming along perfectly. BA thought they captured all the requirements. Developer developed exactly as requested. It was provided to testers. We passed it exactly based on what was required. It was released. And what happened was that we created a series of forms for nurses and doctors to fill out while they were doing patient visits throughout the hospital rooms, doing follow-ups on people, right, to enter a whole bunch of details. It failed miserably, and it took a couple of days for them to figure it out, but the feedback we got was extensively negative, and the reason is that people made an assumption that what happened was that a nurse would take an iPad, they would look at the form, they would fill it all out based on the patient, they would select save, and then they would move on to the next patient. That's not the way they work. They work based on the fact that they would ask some questions, and then they would move on to another patient because they couldn't complete stuff with that one, and they might have to fill out stuff later. They keep going on, they keep going on. What they found was that they lost all the information they entered into the forms because they didn't push save. So then it had to go back, and we had to implement like a automatic saving feature. So it was a little bit of loss of reputation, a little loss of trust there. Like to avoid that in the future. Another one would be in the financial aspect, where assumptions were made again by BAs and developers with regards to the UI design of a particular front to say like an FPOS machine. They thought that they were doing what they were doing as far as covering, assisting with people who are visually impaired. The testing happened where we thought this is the way that it works. Turns out at the end, when people were actually doing it out in the wild and our customer base was actually doing the settings to make it user friendly for people who were visually impaired, they actually used sort of like a built-in hardware setting that wasn't actually tested because we didn't even know it existed. So that was another one where early tester engagement, where we could have learned, how do you actually set that up to make it better? And then we've tested it, it wouldn't have been a gap. So yeah, so those are a couple.
I guess it's things like, it's easy to do something if things are on paper, but actually getting an actual understanding of how users actually use the system is actually quite imperative, right?
Yes.
It's particularly when, they're not just like desk jobs or anything. If they're nurses, doctors, whatever,
Exactly.
where they're actually kind of using it on the go, it's like, how do they do it? And is the software working the way, in harmony with the way they actually work? It's actually really important. Yeah.
Exactly.
And what about AI? So with AI becoming like a real hot topic and a huge focus right now for all industries, not just testing, do you believe this will be relevant? And how could we potentially use AI in terms of early engagement or faster speed to delivery or better quality?
Interesting. Well, I think the growth of AI has been exponential, and there's still a lot more coming. So I probably couldn't envision, what the end is going to be. I can say that, the first thing is the fears that people have with regards to AI replacing testers and stuff. I've gone to the testing talks conferences, and I've also got my own impressions. And at the end of the day, regardless of everything that AI is able to do with, say, constructing test cases based on data that you fill into it and a variety of other things, somebody still needs to check that. We're still not at that stage where we can 100% guarantee that what AI is doing is actually fit for purpose. Sometimes it makes assumptions just like we do. The other thing is that AI will never replace soft skills. So if we as testers show our faces and we are speaking up in meetings and participating and being part of the team, you can't replace that with an iPad with a an AI chatbot sitting next to somebody. So yeah, I think that we don't have to be afraid too much there, but I do think AI is going to change the face of testing generally, and it will hopefully increase quality and provide to projects that testers are keeping up to date on things that are relevant, and that we are able to employ these tools to increase quality in their projects. So we're not necessarily a wasted expense.
I think you can actually get significant value by using AI if you are engaged earlier, right? Because you could have a set of criteria around what good requirements look like, and then you can run those requirements through your AI with that criteria and go, right, where can these requirements actually be improved? Right?
Exactly.
When you can use it for the traceability for test cases, or what test cases might I be missing, etc. Like, you can actually, if you are engaged earlier in the life cycle, you can actually get a lot more value out of AI as an enabling tool, still requiring that human in the loop, right? Because it can hallucinate, etc. But I think you're actually getting much more value out of your AI tools that many organizations are investing in now, right?
Exactly. Well, I mean, it could even be things that testers kind of keep under their hat, as far as, say, for instance, you need to create a whole bunch of data for whatever reason for your testing, right? It used to be back in the day, developers had to write all these different scripts, and depending on the industry you work in, a lot of the ones that I work in are very sensitive to PII information and a variety of other things. The thing is that you can't just take production data, scramble it all up, and stick it back in and hope that it's going to work, because a lot of times those user identities are identified by a variety of different things, and if you mix those up, everything breaks. So you could potentially use AI by feeding it the correct prompts to create these data sets that you're looking for to be able to enable testing. You could reduce the amount of time that it takes, so even on a simple aspect like that.
Yep, 100%. Okay, so I think really, I think that we're kind of coming to an end here. We're at time. So tell us what you think in the audience, either live or recorded. You can scan the QR code, tell us what you think using the link. Remember, the ANZTB is a not-for-profit organisation, so please choose to certify with the ANZTB. We help promote the profession. We provide educational insights like this today with special guest speakers. So thank you, Jason, so much for your time. I know it's really invaluable to us. Thank you for helping out with the testing community and getting some of these really key learnings based on your vast experience across to everybody.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. So again, follow us on our social media platforms so that we're next going to have the next SIGiST is actually going to be, we're probably going to have one in April. We've definitely got one in May with Kelly Yee from Planet. And she's going to be talking about using TMMI to prepare for AI in testing. So really good topic. Yeah, it should be good. And also, we're actually going to be planning to do a SIGiST very soon on women in testing. So as you may all know, it was International Women's Day last week. So with that in mind, we're going to bring some of our strongest test leaders together on a panel for a special SIGiST in a few weeks' time. So look out for our social media posts on that. We'll be posting a month in advance and weeks in advance of that as well. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, Jason. Really appreciate your time today, and wishing you a great rest of the week. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys.